right, everyone ready for round two? All right, this one is managing creatives. So kind of developing teams, maintaining them. So how many of the people in this room would consider themselves very creative people? All right. So I know a lot of times you'll have like very creative people, and then sometimes you'll have very technical people who work in the creative space. And what is really great is we need both of those a lot. So out of the creatives, how many of the creative people, I think 2 or 3 raise their hand, how many of the creative people would say that they are very structured and organized? So are you more creative or are you more technical, you think?
More technical.
All right.
So 35% technical, maybe 25%.
So I've learned, as myself being a creative and as working with a lot of other creatives and technical people, I have learned that creative people are typically not the most structured, and that comes from myself. Most creatives are not the most structured or the most organized. We are the creatives. We like to flow with the energy in the room, and we like to vibe with what we're creating, like all those fun things. Like, it's a blast. I love creating because I kind of just don't think about the technical, and it's like I just want to make it look cool. But then we have to also have the technical and the organized and the structure. And so the majority of creatives I know, that's how they are. They're very just free-flowing. They'll stay up till 3 a.m. working on a project. They will wake up late because they stayed up till 3 a.m. working on a project, or they flow with things and they're structured and it's all about getting the shot and all that. But they lose the organizational and the structure. So that's at least the creatives that I've worked with, and speaking for myself, that's how I feel like a lot of us are. However, for a team to be efficient and a team to be effective, there has to be structure. And so before again, I'm going to preface some of these methods I'm currently working on. I am not perfect. My team is not perfect. We are all still learning. But leading creatives will always be a continuous learning experience. And I'm praying for each of you as you try to lead creatives, because I know how hard it is to lead myself, and I get it. So I almost named the session Managing Creatives with the subtitle of just herding cats, because that's what it feels like working with creatives sometimes. It feels like everyone's just running everywhere. They're all over the place. They're doing their own thing, and you have to find a way to make it all work together for the goal of the church. It's tough. But our goal with leading a creative team, though, is to equip the creatives with strategies to build, strengthen, and maintain the team. In church media ministries, while using the talents and abilities that they have, letting them use those abilities to the best of their ability, letting them be creative, but also making sure that we have a structure in place to make sure that the creative doesn't turn into not getting things done or just kind of fizzle out. We want to utilize the creativity with structure to build a creative team of efficient and effective creatives that are helping with the mission of the church. So to introduce, the importance of creatives in church is to connect the message with the congregation both visually and emotionally. So we want to take the message, and kind of the same word I used last time, we want to magnify that message and do anything we can to help that message visually, emotionally, through video, through photo. We want to do what we can to make that message more visible. So creatives create. They come up with ideas on how to make things interesting or fun or cool or trendy or anything like that. Like, that's our goal. We want to create things that people like to see, that are pleasing, because that will help reach more. However, more importantly, we come up with ideas on how to magnify the message of the gospel every service, whether that be through a sermon slide, through the stage design, through the lighting, the photo, or the videos, or through a social media recap post, or reels, or graphics. The goal is to magnify that message, whether it be for the people in the room when you make a sermon title that really just fits with his message and kind of helps you understand his message better, or through a video where it just consolidates that message into a nice, short form, bite-sized, easy to comprehend recap of his message. That's our goal. Our goal is to magnify that message. And yes, again, this isn't to excuse the fun, or it isn't to excuse the creative or the enjoyable or the trendy stuff, but ultimately we're helping magnify the message to reach people. And I think that's what I don't want to get too far off of that in this conversation or the last meeting, because again, the goal at the end of the day is, are we helping people see Jesus? So I'm not, throughout this, I'm not going to say that it's wrong to create fun. I just may not focus on that as much as I focus on our ultimate goal of reaching people. So as creatives, we make the church appealing to those outside of the church. And we don't do this in a manipulating way. And have you ever... I misspelled my notes. Sorry, guys. It threw me off. So have you ever tried taking a picture of like your food that you're eating and it just doesn't look like it did in person? And you're like, look at this. Like, doesn't this look great? And they're like, no, it looks disgusting. And you're like, well, it tasted really good. That's kind of how it can be when we try to show people we're taking pictures in church and they don't represent the church the right way. We want to do our best to represent the authentic church, the true church. And a lot of my notes will probably coexist with my previous session, but we want to make sure that we are not manipulating, but we're trying to, again, show people the church as true and authentic and as best as possible, because we want them to feel what they feel when they step in. So we want to capture authentic and true life in our church, and we want it to look just as good as it did in the moment. So now that we know what creatives do, let's talk about trying to manage them. Building a team. It is really hard to build a team of creatives at times. I've been working at my church since 2019. So actually in November, I think will be a full 5 years. And we still are building a team. It never ends. You never say, we have the creative team, we're done. Like, it is constant. We'll have people that are in it for a while and then they go to school and they leave for university. We have people that are in it and then they decide that they want to do something else, or they get called to another ministry or another church. We have some people who are coming in and who are needing to learn now and needing to develop themselves, things like that. So it never ends. So you constantly have to be looking at recruitment strategies, so ways to get people involved, and then also training strategies. So looking for passionate individuals with the alignment of what the purpose of social media is. I know we've had some people who they get into it because they want to do something cool, but it fizzles out because they never quite understood why we're doing it. Again, the message. They thought, I'm going to do this, we're going to get a lot of views, I'm going to be able to say I made this, it'll look cool. But they never comprehended truly why we're doing it, and they never bought into the vision of what we're doing. And so trying to find people who are passionate about creativity, but also passionate about why we're doing it. And I'm not saying that has to come at the beginning. They may develop that passion as they do it, but teaching them and letting them know, like, an understanding of this is why we do it. So for those who are just now starting to build a team, look for individuals who may have an interest in it. One really easy way to do that is look at their Instagram, look at their Facebook, look at how they present themselves on Instagram. Do they try to be trendy? Do they try to have this very pretty feed? Do they try to have everything looking nice? That means that they enjoy that. That's something that they like to do. Maybe they would be really good at taking good pictures or videos. Or you can look for creativity in different areas. I have some kids in our youth, and I'm working with them now trying to get them involved, but they take notes and they like to draw and doodle on their notes and make pretty notes and all that. Maybe they would be good at graphic design. Maybe they would be good at things like that. So looking for people who have creativity and trying to utilize that creativity, and trying to make sure that, like, when you say, hey, we want you to join the team, it's not, hey, we want you to take photos one week and video the next week and graphic design the next week. Let them utilize their strengths. If they're a photographer, I had this issue at the beginning, but I would bring someone on the team and then I would ask them to do this and then try something else and then try something else. I had a photographer. He is a great photographer, but he doesn't like to do video. And I kept asking him to do video, and he's like, dude, I'm not good at it. I don't like doing it, but I like doing photos. So I was like, all right, great. Just do photos and make them awesome. And he does that. He does a great job at that. Then I have a videographer who doesn't like to do photos. So finally I was like, okay, you do video. You're great at it. keep doing that. I won't ask you to do photos anymore. Sorry I asked you to do that. You didn't like it. Just you do video. And then finding someone who may like to do graphic design, but really hates walking around with a camera and shooting. So finding those balances and not trying to push people to something that they don't want to do, but allowing them creativity in the things that they do like to do.
Hi, is this your next class?
Yes.
Yes, this is it. They've already started.
Sorry, guys.
It was in the same room, so they kind of just...
Yeah, I kind of just paused for a couple minutes and then rolled over. Sorry about that. I'll give a brief recap just to the newcomers. So real quick, we're teaching on managing creatives, developing teams, maintaining them. And I began by starting, so real quick for the 3 new, are y'all guys creatives? Are y'all helping lead creative teams? What do y'all consider yourselves? Creative, technical people? All right. So as a creative, do you feel like you're very structured and organized? All right. So from my experience with myself and with some other creators I've worked with, very, very creative people are typically not good at organization. And that's something that we do have to practice and you do have to learn. But it also speaks to the fact that we need people who are good at structure and good at organization, and we need creative people to work together to make a good team. So to be effective and efficient on a creative team, there has to be some structure. But there also has to be some ability to flow and be creative, because it has to take both of that. So, quick objective, our goal with leading the creative team is to equip creatives with strategies to build, strengthen, and maintain the team in church while using the talents and abilities that God has given us to create. And I talked about in the previous class and then also in this one a little bit, but ultimately we want to do fun stuff, we want to do trendy stuff, we want to do the cool stuff. Ultimately, we have to remain focused on the fact that our goal is to reach people through social media, to show them the church, to show them Jesus. That's our goal. So I'm not going to go deep into the fun stuff or the creative, like cool, fancy stuff in this. And I don't discount that. I think that stuff's very valuable. But for this portion, we're going to focus on managing creatives to do what we're called to do, which is to reach people. So in the quick introduction for the people who came, we come up with ideas to help magnify the message. That's our goal, to help the pastor and the church magnify the message, whether it be through graphics, through videos, through photos, things like that. And then we're talking about building the team now when y'all came in. And so that's looking for individuals who want to be involved and finding people who could be useful on your team. And one way that I was talking about to do it is you can look at their Instagram feed, their Facebook, if it's a trendy feed, if it's a very pretty feed, or if it's a very clean, it just looks good. You could reach out to them. Maybe they're good at videos or maybe they're good at photos, things like that. You can look at people who are really artistic and they take notes and they doodle and they make really pretty notes, or they doodle and make cool art drawings. They may be really good at graphic design. So it's trying to find people who are creative and trying to find out where they could be able to plug into the team and use those creative skills and those creative abilities for the purpose of the creative team, which is to reach people. There's people who like to write. That's a creative skill, is writing. And this is one that I feel like just kind of gets slept on a lot, because we have people who write really good and they look at social media as like, oh, I don't have anything to offer because they're posting photos and videos and things. We need writers. I hate writing captions. I'm so bad at it, guys. Like, my captions turn into like, church was great today, every time, no matter how hard I try to be different. Or it's like, I'm going to grab a lyric from the song and that's my caption, or I'm going to grab a phrase from the sermon. Like, that's not a skill set. But we have people who are really good writers that, like, a lot of times if I'm struggling, I'll just send a video to them and I say, hey, can you write me a caption for this, because I can't think of what to write. And I actually didn't have it listed here, but one more thing that every good creative team needs is someone who is good at proofreading. The amount of graphics that I've posted and I've spelled something wrong is just never ending. And just for the joy of it, I'll tell y'all my favorite story. We printed 10,000 mailers that we were going to mail out, postcards, and we said Palm Sunday, Good Friday, East Sunday, not Easter. And we printed 10,000. And that went through about 8 people's eyes. They all watched it, they all looked at it, and it made it to print. and then we received them and we looked at them and realized that we spelled it East Sunday. So get a good proofreader on your team, and especially with important things, just send it to them and say, hey, can you read this? Because we're creating, and again, creatives aren't always the most structured. We're also not always the best at spelling, at least in my case. And so we look at things from a how does it fit together type perspective, but a lot of times we don't proofread. And so sending it to someone else and saying, hey, don't look at how good this looks or bad this looks, just read it and tell me if I spelled things right. Very, very valuable to do. Double check your dates, double check your email addresses, phone numbers, all those things. Always double check that stuff and make sure that you get it right. And then again, we're talking about finding different people on the team, people for photo or video or for graphic design or writing captions. There's also room for people who are maybe not the creative type, but are very technical, very organized, very structured, because again, we need both to exist in a creative team to make a good, solid creative team. So some of the very structured people, they could be the person who schedules out content and posts it throughout the week. They don't have to create anything. They may not even have to create captions or photos or videos. They just take it, grab the caption, and put it in a scheduler to make sure that things come out organized. That technical person could be the one, like we talked about in the last class, that organizes data. They look at the data and they say, okay, what's doing well, what's not doing good. And they could, if you had someone who was good at that, that would be a huge blessing to a creative team, where their whole goal is just to focus on data and tell the team like, hey, these things did good, these things did bad. Instagram says do this, Instagram says this is better, that's better. If you could get someone, and honestly, I need to find someone on my team for that, because that's a valuable asset for someone that the creatives, they can focus on just creating, and we have the other people to help the creative team by being structured and organized. Because again, I myself know I'm not structured, I'm not organized. It's very hard for me to do that, and so having someone that could do that and come to alongside of the creative team to help with that is a huge advantage. Those technical or those organized people could be also the ones who say, hey, Christmas is in 4 months. Let's develop a team for creating what Christmas will look like. When do we need the song set? When do we need to release the first promotional graphic? When do we need to have the style or the graphic or the theme plan? So having some people like that just keep the creative people, the unorganized people, and stuff like that in line is very valuable to having that. So I know we say creative team, but it needs more than just creatives. It needs a full team of people who all want to help benefit the church. So that's how to help recruit people. Look for people who have different skill sets, and their skill set may not be, like they may not walk in and say, hey, I'm really good at scheduling out posts, but you notice they're structured, you notice they're organized, and you help them learn that that is a skill set they have. They just haven't noticed. So finding people, recruiting people who have skill sets that could help the creative team, but then also developing. Trying to offer training, provide creative freedom while still letting them while making sure it aligns to the church's goals. So hopefully at some point, depending on where you're at in this process, you either have people on your team, or at this point you may already have some people in your mind that it's like, when I get home, I want to ask that person to join our team to do this task. But now it's time to help them learn and to help them develop and to grow. So a lot of times in church, the one way we do that is just throw them in the fire, let them figure it out. And I don't think that that is a bad idea. Sometimes it does help to just learn on the job. It's really hard to teach some things in the moment, like without them just being in the moment. Sound for me, like running sound in a church, it's really hard to teach that without just letting them run sound on a service. They get a feel for it, things like that. You can't always teach everything. However, you do need to teach them some things, and you may not know all the answers, and that's okay, because YouTube exists, and YouTube is amazing, and YouTube has so many great resources. So one thing I did is I went on YouTube and I was working on developing some training for our video team. And some of these things I know, some of the things I've taught them, and some of the things I've told them, but every time you get someone new on your team, it's really hard to go all the way top to bottom of, all right, what all do I need to teach this person? So I hopped on YouTube and I looked up I looked up for our cameras, we run the Blackmagic Cinema cameras. So I looked up basics of the Blackmagic Cinema camera in church, and there's YouTube videos on it. So I grabbed like 3 of those videos that I watched to make sure they aligned with our church and the way we utilize the cameras, and I put them in a playlist. And then I found another one for like how to be a good camera one operator in the church, and it was talking about that main camera that just follows the preacher. I grabbed that one, put it in a playlist. So then when I onboarded someone to our video team, I said, hey, we're so glad that you want to be a part of the video team. We would love if you would watch this playlist. It will answer a lot of your questions before you come in on that Sunday morning to train. It will answer a lot of those questions. So giving them access to things that align with your church. So any of those videos I did watch first, and I made sure that they align with the way we teach cameras, or like I like my operators to have a little bit of motion in their shots. Like when they are shooting on the Roamer cameras, I want them to have that motion, that feel. That's just the style that I like. It's the style that our church does. So in those videos, I made sure to find videos that taught that aspect, they weren't teaching like, hey, grab the camera and hold it as steady as possible, because that's not what our church does. So trying to find videos that align with how you want your training to be, and then building them a playlist. And then anytime you have someone new, you can just send them that playlist and say, hey, can you watch these videos? If your church has something really unique, and this is something I'm working on for our church. Our cameras, yes, there's a lot of YouTube videos on them, but we have a couple things that are very unique in how they operate. So what I have planned to do is to have someone record me, and I'll walk in and I'll say, hey, this is how you set up camera 2 for a Sunday morning. You grab this battery, that battery, you put it in here, you change the settings here, and you turn it on, you're ready to go. I can upload that to YouTube, add that to the playlist, and then they have the professional videos that are talking about the basics of the camera. Then they have hey, I'm camera 2 this Sunday. I can watch this video and learn how to do it at my church because I'm seeing Ben walk up and do it to the camera that I'm going to use on Sunday. So you can also incorporate into those playlists videos of yourself or someone on your team explaining something that's more specific to your situation. But again, just creating people resources and giving people resources to know what they need to do. And make it a type of onboarding when they want to join the team, that they watch these videos. That way, when they come in, they know what they're looking at and they know what they're starting. Another thing I've done, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in our photo class tomorrow, but make a handbook for your team. It's a little more work and it's a little hard to do, but build a creative team handbook. And I have one available that I made for our photo team, so that's why I would talk about it tomorrow. But if anybody wants that, I think I actually have a download link for it on my website. But that's something I built for our photo team, and actually I can pull it up so y'all can see it. I just can't put it on there. Maybe. Yeah. So I call it the Church Photographer Handbook. I developed it, though, specifically for my church photographers so that when they join the photo team, I said, hey, I want you to look through this and understand how we want our church photographers to operate on our services. So let me see. So like this is the handbook. I tried to make it pleasing. It has the mission statement of our creative team, which aligns with the mission statement of our church. And then it talks about settings and composition for church photographers. And then it has general shots and ideas of what we want to capture. We want to capture authentic interactions, authentic worship, community, energy, smiles, personality, our branding, so signs that have our logo on it. We want those captured. We want to capture diversity and ethnicity, age and gender. And then I put photos that I really liked from our church, and I put them there. So when these photographers are looking at it, they can see, hey, these are styles that we like. And one other important thing when training, since I have this created, I had a really good photographer who got into editing, and he edited really good for about a month or two, and then his edits all started to get really, really warm. And then I was like, hey man, like your edits are starting to get warm. And he's like, oh, I don't really think they're getting that warm. So I sent him this again. I said, hey, look at these pictures, look at your pictures. And he's like, oh yeah, they are. They're getting further away from the guidelines of our brand of what we want to incorporate. So instead of just being like, hey, your photos don't look good, can you make them cooler? Or hey, your photos are warm, can you cool them down? Or things like that. I was able to say, hey, look at the guidelines that we created for our church of photographers. Can we do better at matching that? So it doesn't come across as me just attacking his style or attacking his work, but it's saying like, hey, this is what we've decided is the brand of our church we want to capture. So it's also an easier way to address things with your photographers because you already have kind of rules and guidelines set in place. I have etiquette of our church photographers, and like I said, I'll go over more of this in detail in a photo session tomorrow. Expectations for the team, do's and don'ts for the team, and then a rough shot list for the team, service schedule. So just giving clear expectations to your team, whether that be through a full-on handbook that you give them. Another thing I'm working on is I want to print 10 or 15 of those, and when I have a new photographer join the team, I can hand them and be like, hey, I'd love for you to look at this, study this. Making it personal and making it almost a celebration, have someone join the team. That's kind of like my next step in our creative team, is like really making it, when you join the team, like you feel like you just joined an awesome team. Like that's my next step at our church. But because you want people to feel like they're involved in something great, in something big. And so, yeah, giving them resources, the things that they need. You don't want them to come in and feel like they're alone in what they're doing, or that they have no idea, or that they just have to figure it out by themselves. We want to give them what they need so that they can do the best. I talked about these last time, but there's a lot of tools and apps for content creation, scheduling. For mobile or beginner or free options, there's Canva, CapCut. Another app by GoDaddy called Studio, which is almost like a Photoshop alternative for mobile, which is really cool. And then for scheduling, Meta Business Suite. It's Facebook and Instagram's built-in scheduler. It's not my favorite, but it's free and it works well. And honestly, when it comes to scheduling, sometimes Facebook just prefers you to use their own software because that's how they are. YouTube, you can schedule on YouTube, you can do all that, but I do recommend scheduling out posts. And that also is beneficial for your creative team because you can have a position for that, and you can also allow someone to take ownership of making sure that schedule's out properly, and it reduces stress on the person who has to wake up and say, oh, it's 2 o'clock, I forgot to post this thing. So it's easy to learn how to schedule, and then it will make you feel so good. Like the first time I really scheduled out a week of content, I felt so good like that week because I was like, I don't have to touch anything. And I'm like scrolling on my phone and I see something, I'm like, I forgot I scheduled it. And that was perfect timing of when it was supposed to go up. It's just great. For advanced, I recommend Lightroom and Photoshop. They're great. Adobe's expensive. There are other alternatives. I know Affinity is a Lightroom and Photoshop alternative that I have used once or twice, but I haven't bought in yet because I'm just so ingrained in Lightroom and Photoshop, but I might eventually because Adobe just keeps getting more expensive. But Lightroom and Photoshop are great advanced apps if you want to dig further into photo editing, further into graphic design, things like that. DaVinci Resolve, if you want to get into video, it's free to start. It's free to get you can get very in-depth in DaVinci before you get to a point where you need to pay for the studio version. So I always recommend DaVinci. Final Cut's very easy, but it does have a cost to it. Premiere, if you already have all of Adobe stuff, Premiere is also a good editor. It's just, when it comes to someone who hasn't learned anything and wants to get started, now I just push people to DaVinci. Because if you just watching trends, most people are already switching that because it's been a better software lately. So I'd rather just tell someone, hey, go here first so you don't have to switch in 5 years when you realize that your software, like you realize your needs are DaVinci. And again, they all do a great job. They're all super great. That's just the one I've been pushing to people to, especially since it has that free version that's very, very well equipped. So that kind of goes through some of the organization of why we have a creative team, how to find people to join your creative team, how we want to develop the creative team and build the team and resource the team and equip the team. And then lastly, or not completely lastly, but another big important part on building the team is giving them structure. I can't stress it enough. Most creatives strive on a few things, but one thing, and again, I speak from experience of being a very creative and very unorganized person, give them deadlines. Sometimes all a creative needs is the fact that knowing like, oh, they need this by next week to make sure they get it done. When you say, hey, create this video, take your time, do it whenever you want, that video most likely will never get done. But if you say, hey, I would really love to post this by Wednesday, can you get it to me Tuesday so that I can post it? That person we strive on that fact of knowing like, hey, we need to get this done. So I recommend give them some structure. Give them structure of what you want. So in that handbook, I have a structured shot list. And I say, hey, this is not a rule. I'm not saying that these are the photos you have to take. But if you don't know what to shoot, take these ones. These are all really good photos to have. So give them some type of structure, set expectations, say, hey, I want the photographer here 5 or 15 minutes before service because I want shots in our foyer of people greeting. So give them kind of an understanding of what the expectations are, will help the creative team have a strong dynamic of organization and structure. Where again, you're not hindering them and saying like, hey, don't be creative, or I just want this. You're not like micromanaging, but you're giving them things to follow and rules to follow that keep them in line and keep them in check. One thing I have started doing with my photographers, and this is something that I've gone back and forth of, but has actually made a difference. I now ask my photographers on a Sunday morning to give me 30 photos. So I've gone through years of letting them shoot me 200 photos at the end of a service, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to edit 200 photos or go through 200 photos. But now I've challenged some of them, especially the ones that I know have a habit of just shooting and not paying attention, just going crazy. I say, hey, by the end of service, when you drop off the memory card, I want 30 photos on it. And what that does is it makes them so intentional about taking pictures, or they can go crazy, but they have to go through the photos on the camera and delete things. So what that's done is that made the photo count of me to get 200 photos, and then I get like 20 photos out of it. Now I get 30 photos, and I have typically 30 good photos because they're being intentional with their photos. They're not just pressing burst on this moment where they take 20. They're waiting for that moment for the shot, and it will make them a better photographer, and it'll make your job editing a lot easier. So there's that structure that you want to give them to make things work a little bit better and help them. But then when there's special events, when there's baptisms, we did a tent revival about a month ago. I told all the photographers, I was like, dude, just go crazy. Like, just get the shot. If you bring back 500 photos, like, it's going to be a pain to go through, but I don't want you to delete something in camera or miss a shot because you were like, I only have 20 photos. So I was like, just go crazy, just be intentional. So trying to teach that, and when you teach the balance of, hey, in this service I want you to take 30 photos, and then you do give them the ability to go crazy, they are still more intentional because they've developed that habit of being aware of their shots and being aware of their composition and framing. So again, just giving them some type of structure will really help your team. Having team dynamics is very valuable, and making sure there's a culture of collaboration, a culture of communication between the two. Again, if you really do start developing a creative team where you have a photographer and then a videographer and then you have a graphic designer, you don't want everyone to just do their own thing entirely, because then nothing will make sense together. So you do still need to have communication of what's going on. You need to be able to manage design styles. Sometimes you have people who their style doesn't match with your church's style. And so what I do is, for videos, I have specific presets that I give people. I'm like, hey, if you're making a video, please use this because this is our church's style. I have a Lightroom preset that is on our church computer. It's on my laptop, and anybody else that edits for us, they have that preset because it's like, if you're going to shoot photos at the church, I want it to look like our church. So they use that preset. And that goes back to, you don't have to be the mean guy and say, hey, your edits don't look good. You can say, hey, can you just use the preset that we have for the church because it matches our branding. So it protects you as a leader from not being the mean guy of saying that their creative skill isn't good, because it's not always that creative skill isn't good, it's that it may not align with the vision of the church. So we want to just set those expectations, give them the resources to allow everything to flow smoothly together. I'm sure we've all seen churches where it looks like somebody from the 1990s designed the graphics, and then some kid from 2024 made the video, and they just don't feel the same. And it's like, these don't feel like they work together because they're just two completely polar opposite styles. So learning how to bring those together and find a balance between the two of saying like, hey, instead of using 15 fonts on your graphic, let's use the church's branding font and maybe one creative font. And then for the person making the video, hey, instead of doing all these crazy transitions and filter effects, like maybe simplify it a little bit more because it matches better with the overall theme of the church. So just learning how to manage those creatives. And again, I speak from myself. I don't want to ever feel like I'm attacking someone. I just know my aspect of a creative. When someone says like, hey, could you change this? It's really easy to like feel like that person didn't like what I did. And a lot of times it's not, hey, I need you to change this because I don't like what you're doing. It's, I need you to change this because it doesn't fit the feel of the entire scope of what we're doing. So I actually just spoke with someone about this the other day, and I was learning from them. And he told me, he's like, when I was finally able to realize that no matter whether my work was good, bad, or they liked it or they didn't like, that my identity is found in Jesus. My identity is found in God, and my identity is found in I'm a child of God. That's my identity. My work, my video, my editing, that's not my identity. I'm doing that because I love the church, because I love Jesus, because of that. But if they don't like it, that's not an attack on me. That's a style that it may not match the church. It's not an attack on my identity because my identity is not found in my work. My identity is found in God. So he told me that, and I was like, wow, that's a great way to think about it. I'm putting that in my notes. I'm using that. But learning that, like, if you are a creative and someone says, hey, could you change this or you could do that, not getting defensive because it's not an attack on you. It's not an attack on your skill or your ability. It's just saying, hey, this may not match the style of what we're going for, and we want to do that. So learning that separation, it's very hard because I deal with it too when someone doesn't like it, and I feel like they hate all my work, they don't like what I do. Like, just learning that that's not what that is. It's simply we want to make it work best for the church, the mission of reaching people. So that's another thing that I would just want to throw in there is don't let your identity be stuck in what you do, but let your identity be found in God, and what you do is a byproduct of being a child of God and a byproduct of your skill and a byproduct of that. It is not the reason we do everything. The reason is for Jesus. All right, and then sustaining the team. So we've built the team, we've given the team resources, we've developed structure and things like that. We've learned how to create a culture of collaborating and communicating, maintaining the team. Every team will run into conflict. Every team will have multiple personalities where you have to figure out how people work well together with certain people. Certain people may not work well together with other people. So being aware of that as a leader, making sure that we are keeping the team motivated, keeping the team happy. I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier. One thing I want to do with my creative team is I want to get better at celebrating the people on the team. I noticed about 2 months ago, I was like, man, a lot of times when I text people, I'm texting them and saying, hey, how's it going? Could you do this? And I was like, I need to get better at texting people and just texting them. Hey, how's it going? How are you doing? How's life going? Like, this isn't because I need you to run a camera on Sunday. I'm just trying to get involved in your life. I'm trying to be a friend. I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to do that. Or when I talk to people at church, a lot of times I'd find myself going up to people and be like, hey, how's it going? Like, hey, do you think you could do this next week? Or do you think you're available? And it kind of caught me and convicted myself because I was like, man, I don't want anybody to feel like when I walk up to them, it's because I need to get something from them. Like, I want to be able to have conversations with people, to be enjoyable to hang out with. I don't want people to not want to come up to me because they know that I'm going to ask them to do something. So that's something that I'm trying to build a better balance of, is when I'm talking to people, I could motivate them. I can tell them that they're doing a great job. I could thank them for all the work that they've done. But I don't want to always ask them to do something every time I'm in that conversation with them, because that will lead to me being the person that they either avoid because they don't want to work or they don't want to just always be asked to do something. So learning that, I think, is valuable. Learning how you lead and your strengths and your weaknesses and utilizing those to the best of your ability is very valuable. And then preventing burnout by making sure there's healthy boundaries and balanced workloads. I talked in the last class how my church does a lot all the time. It's like we're always busy, I feel like. But trying to balance that out, and then also letting people know, like, if we're going into a really busy season, kind of giving some heads up, like, hey guys, it's about to be a really busy season. I might schedule you a lot if you're okay with that. But no, if you need to hit decline in Planning Center, if you need to say, hey, I can't do this weekend, there's nothing wrong with that. I've tried to tell, we have youth who I feel like they feel like I'm going to be mad every time they hit decline. And I'm like, guys, they'll come and they're like, man, I'm so tired. I can barely do this today. I'm like, you could have said no. Like, I have nothing against you saying no. Like, yes, I would have to find a replacement and things like that, but I don't want them to ever feel like if they say no, I'm going to be upset with them or I'm going to have an issue with that. Like, I want them to know that what they're doing is a blessing to the church. It is not a requirement for what they do. It is not a requirement for their spirituality. It's not a requirement for their salvation. What they do is blessing the church as a volunteer. And it is blessing to the team and all of that. So again, I don't want to ever place the burden on them that they can't decline or they can't go sit in a service because they need to. Because what they're doing is they're blessing the church. And sometimes, especially with volunteers, it's a hard thing to work constantly. Sometimes those volunteers need to be blessed by the church. And I'm not speaking from necessarily monetarily, but sometimes they need to sit in a service and receive. And so if you have volunteers that are serving all the time, it is very easy to get burnt out because they are constantly giving and never receiving from the church. And then just like I realized I was becoming this like burden every time I talked to people because I would always go talk to them and ask them for something, they will then develop this feeling of like the church is something that just needs me to do stuff rather than the church is a community of believers that are worshiping Jesus. Like the church becomes just another thought in their head of, oh, I have to go serve. And so making sure that they understand that they can maintain boundaries of, hey, I need to sit in a service. Hey, I need to receive this service. Hey, I really need to just take a break from media this week or things like that. Making sure there's boundaries in place that you can have that. They can say no and not feel attacked, or they can say no and not feel guilty. And then also just making sure that as well as you can that you balance the schedule out when you're scheduling. When I know I'm going to ask someone to kind of like serve back-to-back weeks or things like that, when it's not typical, I try to reach out to them by a text and say, hey man, like this week's going to be really busy or so-and-so's out. Do you mind if you could do Sundays back-to-back? Like I know I don't typically ask you, but I just wanted to check with you. And if you need to say no, you can say no. So like things like that, just making sure that there's healthy boundaries, healthy workloads, things like that. You're not overloading people as much as possible will create a healthier team and a healthier environment. So I think technically speaking, that is the 45 minutes. However, I didn't plan on talking the whole 45 minutes. So let me see, yeah. So that would have been the 45 minutes. So I'm gonna open it up for questions. There's not a session after this. So does anybody have questions or thoughts or anything that they want to talk about? Go for it.
Do you have like a template that you use for your like photos that you edit? Is it always like drag and drop and then your photos are the same like what you were saying?
Yeah.
Or do you have to like start from scratch following?
So when it comes, you're talking about for photo editing?
Yeah.
So when it comes to photos, I have a Lightroom preset. And when the photographers take their photos, either typically I edit or we have another guy on our team who edits. I would love every photographer to edit, but a lot of our photographers are like very young youth and they may not be able to stay after church. They may not be able to stay late or come in at a different time. So typically it's me or another photographer. But what we do is we have a preset on our computer that we'll drop the photos in, we'll organize them, we'll delete the ones that we don't like, and then we just paste the preset to all of them. And typically after pasting the preset, you'll have to just adjust like brightness sometimes and temperature sometimes, like if it's too warm or too cold. But for the most part, it's paste the preset and just tweak it. And so it's easy to teach editing. It's more of like a time thing for me building out an editing team. When me and the other photographer, we can edit most of the photos in an hour or two for the week. So, but yeah, having a preset, you can do presets in Lightroom Mobile. You can do presets in a lot of different photo editors that you can just kind of copy it, save that preset, and just paste that preset onto all your photos. Yes?
I know you mentioned like overshooting photos. Would you say there's overshooting video as well?
So it depends on how you're capturing video. So we had a separate videographer for a long time at my church where they would shoot for social, live stream would shoot live stream. So recently I was struggling with volunteer base and like scheduling all of that out. So recently I transitioned we had some like older broadcast cameras on broadcast. I transitioned some Blackmagics that I owned personally that the church owned. I put those in our live stream. So our live stream quality would be elevated, and then now I just take reels from our live stream.
Yeah.
So I don't actually have anyone shooting for social on Sunday unless it's a special project.
Yeah.
Typically, I'll take my service live stream and just cut that up for reels. And there is a quality difference. Obviously, it's so much better when you shoot your own and it's specific for social. But for volunteer base, that was what was needed in our church at that time. And then, but when you're shooting for projects, there definitely can be overshooting. And I think it just depends. If you're editing your own stuff, I don't really tell anybody to worry about overshooting. Like, you're the one that has to deal with it anyways. It was more so I was editing photographers' photos and they would kind of just go crazy. And then when I have videographers shoot for me and I have to edit their footage, I try to just let them know what I want.
Yeah.
So I either try to send them a video of like, hey, this is the idea that I'm going to work off of. I want it to feel like this. Because you definitely can run into overshooting. But you can also run into videographers undershooting, and that can really be hard to make a video out of too. So when it comes to video, a lot of times, unless I know they're going to go like absolutely crazy, I let them shoot over because I may need more to make a video. But if you're editing your own video, I would just say, think in your mind what the video will look like and try to shoot as close to that as possible. I'll still shoot extra shots just to have on hand, but my goal is typically to have the idea of the video in my mind and to shoot accordingly.
Okay, yeah.
Anyone else? I know we're over time, but there's...
Question about team, about building a team. How do you find new recruits to build that team, I guess, you know?
Yeah, so like getting more people involved.
Yeah.
So one thing that we do that has been helpful, and this is actually, again, something I'm working on still, because I'm currently at the point where we had a lot of people just go to college and university, and now we are down a lot of like solid members on our team. And so I'm at the point now where I'm like, I need to find more people, so I need to build relationships, talk to people, have conversations. You'll find those people who, again, we're looking for people who either have creativity or want to learn. We have one guy at our church, he's in his 30s, and he is a great camera operator now, but he came in and he's like, hey, I just want to be involved. Like, where's the need? We said, hey, right now we need some video camera operators who are adults and not youth, because when our youth go to do something, we're like, we have nobody. So he's like, yeah, sure, let's learn it. And he's great now, and he loves it, but it just took him saying like, hey, I just want to do it. So sometimes you'll just find the willing people who just want to learn, and then sometimes you'll find someone who has a skill set that you can utilize. So it's a little bit of both, and then also just letting people know that there's a need there. Some people are just waiting to know there's a need, and they're not going to walk up to you and say like, hey, do you need help on video, or do you want, or like, hey, I want to be a part of the video team. Some people are waiting to be asked. And so building those relationships with people, looking at people who may not volunteer in other areas and try to get them involved, because it's also another opportunity for someone to be involved in the church. And it's a very low, I say, for lack of a better term, it's a low cost of entry. They don't have to be the absolute perfect person to be able to learn how to be a videographer or a photographer. And I don't mean this in any negative, but they also don't always have to follow stage guidelines to be in the video team. And sometimes it's an easier way for someone to get involved as a newer convert, because they can feel plugged in and attached to the service and involved without going through a very, very long growth track. One thing we do at our church, we have a 3-week course that if they're new to the church, they can take it, and it's like an introduction to our church, an introduction to salvation, an introduction to our beliefs. And then at the end of that 3-part course, they graduate, and on that last lesson, there's an option where they can fill out a Google form that's like, are there any ministries that you're wanting to be involved in? Here's the ones that are available after you finish these 3 weeks. If you want some more involved ministries, there's another course that's a longer lesson plan for either music ministry or stage ministry or kind of Bible studies, things like that. you can go through a longer membership course to be involved in those. So it's kind of like we have levels. And when they finish those 3 weeks, they can immediately be plugged in on our welcome team, our greeters, our ushers, our video team, areas like that where it's a lower cost of entry because it just gets them plugged in quickly. And so just giving people that option, a lot of times people don't realize there is an option. And I think we do a disservice expecting people to want to come up to us and ask to be involved if we're not going to go ask them if they want to be involved.
We have another question around these. With your creative team, do you do events or do you catch ups outside of church events, I guess?
It's something I've been trying to do. I understand church schedules are busy and volunteers are not required to do anything because they're volunteers. That's the beauty of them blessing the church, is that they're volunteering their time and energy. So I try to be cautious of not asking too much, but I also do see there is a very high value in community and fellowship. And that's something I haven't done well with, but I continually want to do better with, because just getting people together in a non-work environment, again, that you don't want your view of that or their view of you to be every time I'm with him, it's because we're working. Sometimes there needs to be like, hey, I can just be a friend to this person, or they can be looking out for me, or they can be checking in on my day or my life. So building that relationship, if you can't do weekly meetings or monthly meetings or bi-monthly, if you can't do those, like I think those are great. Maybe like a pizza night where you just hang out, chill, or barbecue or something in the backyard, or just we go to a coffee shop, things like that. Those are very good. If you can't do that, or you don't have the ability to get to that point yet, have conversations with people as much as possible that don't involve a need. Have a conversation where you're just looking to talk to them and have a relationship with them that doesn't involve, hey, I need you to do something, or doesn't finish with that. Sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, I noticed that I was doing that. So even when I need something, sometimes I'll make sure I have a conversation with them, and then I'll come back later and ask them about the need. Because I want to distinguish, sometimes I'm just going to talk to you as a friend, sometimes I'm going to ask you about a need I have. But I didn't want to talk to you as a friend and then follow it up with, hey, I need this, because I'd never want it to just always feel like I'm asking them. So if you don't have time to do events where you get the whole team together, at least try to stay connected to the team individually. And again, I think the ultimate goal would be try to get the team together at some point for something. And then just being very thankful before or after service, letting them know, hey, we're grateful for you. We're grateful for everything you did. Thanks for serving today. And just making sure that they feel very included in the team. And it's not just this isolated person. So that's another thing, is I'll try to either do a group text with the team or make sure the team's all around when I thank them at the end of service, to kind of handle it as like, thank you guys for serving together, for being a part of the team. Not just like, hey, thanks to this person and I'll walk up to the next person. I just trying to build that community of people is valuable. And that can be very valuable to do external meetings, but if you can't develop that culture at the moment, at least internally try to thank them, try to build the team together. Anyone else? All right, well, if anyone has any questions in the future, feel free to connect with me, either social, or if you need my number or anything like that, feel free to ask questions. I want to be as much of a resource as I can. Tomorrow in the photo class, I'll probably go more in depth on that photo handbook. But if anybody wants access to that, I can give you all access to that as well. I have a download link on my website, or I can just send you a Dropbox link to it. But again, just developing resources for people and making sure that we're helping these teams do the best they can without feeling like they have to struggle to do it, or that they're isolated in what they're doing. And then ultimately, the goal is just reminding them what it's all about, which is to reach people.